and an increase in demand for people to be able to charge their cars when they get to the site. I tend to use an argument, I don't have petrol pumps or diesel pumps, but there seems to be an expectation that we provide this fuel source on a hospital site for vehicles as well, and an increase in demand from senior leaders to put it in as well, without truly understanding the cost of the amount of infrastructure that needs to go into putting a charge point in. So just to put 7 kilowatt chargers into an area where we have community staff going out to see cancer patients will cost about £80,000. It'll cost us 50,000 to get the electric to the point they need to be.
And we have a lot of demand from staff who have now changed over to electric vehicles to get them put in. Looking at some sort of parking allocation to allow multiple people to use them within a day rather than electric vehicle charging hoggers.
Say that again, sorry.
Electric vehicle parking hoggers.
Right. So this is blocking all day a charge point, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it needs 10% charge. We'll just plug it in and charge it all day, and then the space isn't available for anybody else for the rest of the day.
Okay. And this is on the staff parking side?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So our charges are available to the public as well, but staff do monopolise them during the working day.
I'm the lead project officer for the EV infrastructure, so not the fleet side, but more the where you plug it in. So I joined the council maybe about 10 months ago now, and I manage all the public infrastructure, going to try and roll out some schemes for people who don't have their own off-street parking, putting in charge points in our council car parks for public use, also at our offices and depots for staff use, and then working with our fleet team, we're trying to get more electric vehicles to make sure that they've got somewhere to plug in their vehicles as well.
I've only got a fleet of about 25. The vans are a problem. So the vans are at the moment requiring tail lifts and adaptions. So you encounter weight restrictions on limits. So an electric van probably weighs about 2 tonne. By the time you put a tail lift on and then you start putting the stuff that you're carrying into it, you quickly exceed the 3.5 tonne limit. So then there are licence restrictions for the drivers who are allowed to limit it, and the costs are extortionate. But we've got 20,000 staff.
We have a fleet replacement strategy in place where from 27-28 we're starting to look at replacing our light commercial vehicle fleet with EVs from there. So we're looking at the challenges now around that. We are currently having some development work at one of our main depots where we're looking to try and implement some EV charging in there through our partners Connected Curb. The challenges around that are probably the same as what everybody's facing. Cost, infrastructure, the legislation still around EVs, around this 4.25 tonne and the 3.5 tonne, and all of the licensing and legislation around all of that. So yeah, that's probably a quick summary of where we are.
Yeah. But the council pressures are holding us back, and I think, and that's not that'll be the same for everyone. And it's how do we manage that process as best we can, to the point where there is a clear strategic direction from the council, and then what does that look operationally, financially, and because Darren will have to upskill his team, he'll have to change how he actually operates, because we'll flip from one side to another. So there's a lot of logistical issues here that if we don't start now, it'll explode in 2 or 3 years time. So in our head we've got like from 2028, 29 onwards, we're looking to try and plan to transition, but that's us. That's maybe not the council. So, but we've got to have something in place to work from, and then understand what the appetite is for the council to do that.
Pricing is still an issue for us because electric vans are still, I don't know, 25% more expensive than their diesel counterparts. Although on the flip side of that, I can tell you that our electric vans are cheaper to run than the diesel ones, simply because people are charging at home, so we're taking advantage of their local energy prices. Maintenance is a fraction on the electric vans that it is on diesel ones.
They've done away with the 5 hours compulsory
They
training
have
that you
done
have
away
to
with
have
that,
before you
yeah.
can drive anything above that.
Yeah.
But the situation where your driving licences and your driving hours and everything like that, your annual MOT testing because it's classed as an HGV instead of just a van.
And there are very few test centres who are equipped to do it.
That's right.
I was reading that, I think that came out a few weeks ago.
So all of that's been sort of like debated through the, well, Logistics UK, Freight Transport
Yeah.
Association. They're taking that to government and everything like that to try and make it easier for everybody to be able to have a 4.25 tonne electric van
Yeah.
compared to a 3.5 tonne diesel panel van.
Capability funding is basically funding that we get, so grant funding to cover staff wages. So some staff contracts may only be for 2 or 3 years because they're fully funded by capability funding from central government. So unfortunately, because the grant funding for capital schemes can be quite delayed, some people can't find themselves in post for a while to deliver on Levi funding, for example, but that funding is delayed by a year, 18 months. So are we actually going to have staff in place to be able to manage and deliver these grant projects by the time that person's contract ends, if you like? So
It's aligning those two things together, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So we've had difficulties. So there's a couple of our staff who are funded in that way.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for grant funding for capital for quite some time now. So there's issues there.
It's fairly simple. I have a wallet that links back to the company, so publicly I can go out and scan the QR code and it just brings me straight on, except that charge point is not online. None of them are. Now I know from experience that the likelihood is that charger just needs a reboot, but nobody's taking responsibility for that. So they have however many charging bays out there that don't work. And as I said, I came upstairs raging this morning. I've calmed down since. But it's such a simple thing of having the back office there to, because there will be alerts that live in that system that say that charger has disconnected. There are very simple actions, usually turn it off, turn it back on again. It's not any more complicated than that usually. Give the thing a power cycle, it remembers it's a charge point, comes back to life and people can use it. But there's not the responsibility for it. What we're trying to do and what we've had success doing is approaching it from a different point of view, which is where we engage with ICPs and IDNOs. So essentially what that means is that we provide a connection through an independent party. We provide a new substation through an independent party. Now, like you, the first time I heard of this, I was like, it's going to cost an absolute bomb. There's no way that the customer's going to be able to swallow that. IDNOs operate, their business model is essentially to give you what's called an asset valuation, and that what they do is they value that substation at a certain amount and then they lease it back to the network. So in essence they're paid their money back over a period of 99 years, which means that they enter into a lease, which essentially means that because you're putting it on on your premises, if you're upgrading the network you can be paid to have a new substation. We've seen it before where the cost of these, if an asset valuation is 160 grand and the cost to put it in is only 140, you've made 20 grand by having a new substation and empowering the possibility of not just having that close, a much closer power connection, but you essentially are feeding back into the grid. You're enabling more power capacity in the grid.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, I'm guessing this is going to be a really good way of bringing around a second power supply to site as well. Something that I know we struggle with regionally is we'll have a budget, we'll have a site where we want power, but all the power with the DNO will not give us a second supply dedicated to where we get around that.
Yeah, so the headache with the DNOs, and they aren't at the table today, so I'm not offending anybody, but the headache that we find with DNOs is they predominantly want to connect on an LV level, so at a low voltage level, the sort of level that we see around us day to day. What the ICP and IDNO allows us to do is to tap into the HV rings, which tend to have more capacity on them than the LV rings. The LV stuff is what all our houses and commercial properties, etc., is all connected to. but the HV tends to have more capacity to it. There's more availability for a half megawatt substation. But as I mentioned previously, we've seen ridiculously low costs because it allows for them to recirculate that power into the LV connection. So there are lots of ways around it. It's not quite as simple as how many 7 kilowatts do you want on your wall. You know, we used to say it's about solutions, not boxes. It's more than that now. It's solutions plus the background information that can come with it.
So just out of interest, we're currently in contract with a CPO and we're going through the rigmarole with the DNO and some of the costs are quite expensive. Should we be the ones pushing for them to talk to the IDNO, or should they? I mean, some of the sites are expensive, some aren't. It's one of those things, but no one's really mentioned an IDNO to us as local authorities, and from their side, is it something that we should be pushing on them, or just just suggesting, I suppose, rather than pushing? Or
if I'm being honest with you, it depends what they're capable to do. We've seen a lot of CPOs, and that's part of the reason why we feel like we have something different to offer to the market. We've seen a lot of CPOs that see that kind of revenue share and the fact that they get paid while they're sleeping, essentially, if the chargers are in use, as a bit of a golden ticket, and they come into maybe an app background or an IT background, or they engage with contractors to do their installations, or a hardware background.
Hardware manufacturers take on that.
Yeah,
role.
but yeah, quite right. But the issue lies that when you get to the bottom of it, their project managers and their sales staff have come from car salesman roles, security roles. The reason I think that we have had the success we have is because there's a spine of us, from myself down to our apprentices, that know what we're doing. We know what it is we need to do, and we know what it is you guys are asking for us to do. And so there's an understanding piece there, whereas you very often can get, no, that's fine, we do that, we'll organise the DNO for you, and then they come back to you with this exorbitant cost, and they said, well, you asked us to do it, this is what it is, and it's a stumbling block.
So we work with Volvo and Renault trucks. We provide charging to all their sales in the UK currently. So they used to run a practice where they would quite literally strap a charger into the passenger seat of the truck, but they found that they would then put that onto their mate, the electrician, who would install it badly, and it gave them all kinds of problems. So they've started asking us to do it for their customers. The charger they put in is obviously not DC, it's actually AC. It's a 43 kilowatt AC charger, which may sound quite small considering it's a truck, but bearing in mind the mileage patterns and whatnot, so most of these customers means this truck is sat still overnight. It means that 43 kilowatts over a shutdown period of 10 hours will give you 430 kilowatts into the charge, into the lorry.
So when I joined the council, I would say the infrastructure was in a little bit of a bad shape. Wasn't smart, dumb chargers, all on free vend. So I've been working the last few months to make sure that all our charge points are smart now, so we can get some data off them. And there is a tariff now, so there's some money coming in to keep maintaining these charge points.
And how has that process of taking up the dumb chargers and putting in smart chargers, has it been a good experience for you, or a difficult birth?
It needed doing.
Right.
And then, at one point I did 5 charge points and I lifted up the flap and there were 3 pin plugs.
Yeah.
So I think I changed them all to smart ones last October, and it's been much better. We get the data now, you can see how often they're being used.
but not been quite as successful at replacing what we very politely term our legacy chargers.
Yep.
I'm talking about 2012 plugged-in places, 3 pins. We've still got an embarrassing number of them. Some of them still working by some miracle around the borough. That will be replaced as part of the Levi fund when that starts rolling in very, very short, hopefully.
If your CPR goes into an agreement whereby the understanding of the market, the understanding of the utilisation, and the attractiveness of the installations, etc., hasn't been fully qualified, and they go out of business, you're still orphans. You've still got units in the ground that, because if the SIM licenses and the CPMSs and all the rest of it doesn't work, the authorisation doesn't work, the chargers simply won't accept a charge. and then there's another headache, and
which is exactly what's happened with EV Box.
Yeah, we know of a few others as well. We at least one a month we get a phone call from usually private companies, but some public as well, where they say we went into this agreement with this company, they've installed our chargers and they've gone bust, and now they don't work. Can you recommission them and take them on as your own? And we do, because it tends to be a back office or a manufacturer that we know and we can kind of work with. But some, as I mentioned earlier, with that kind of hovering server cloud where they're actually proprietary, your only option is to replace.
And one of the new areas that we've really got our teeth into is battery dismantling, and we see that as a big opportunity in terms of the movement, transportation of batteries, and actually disassembly of batteries as well.
Battery manufacturers are now warranting batteries for 7 years, 120,000 miles, 100,000 miles. Typically, they know the charge cycles and there's newer chemistries they're putting into the batteries are lasting a lot longer. So they're only using 30% of the battery's energy in a car. So from 100% to 70, typically that is the useful life in the vehicle, and that's about 2,500 charge cycles at the moment. That's from flat to full, 2,500 times. And as the batteries get bigger, of course, you're only charging once or twice a week. So they're going to be lasting at least 10 to 12 years in a car.
It seems to be that the resale value of a 5-year-old electric vehicle is dramatically less than what an ICE engine vehicle is. So you've got the inflated cost at point of procurement, and then you've got the deflated cost at the point of sale. So whole life costs is an awful lot more for an electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle.
And I think
You might have less maintenance costs in between, but again, if you've got a 3.5 ton vehicle with a diesel engine in, let's say, and you've got a 4.25 ton vehicle that's got a battery in, surely that has an effect on the wear and tear on your tyres, the wear and tear on your suspension, the wear and tear on your steering.
Yeah, I mean,
You've got a heavier vehicle.
I mean,
It's got to have.
that's
Got to have more wear and
that's
tear
not
on it.
what I'm hearing, and I've spoken.
That's not our experience.
No.
Absolutely not.
And I've
We've
spoken to a lot of
analysed our
local authorities.
maintenance costs, looking at tyres, and we on our fleet we haven't seen a difference. The tyre wear is identical, pretty much, on an ICE and a BEV vehicle.
Yeah, and a lot of local authorities that I've spoken to, not least of which at roundtable events like this, are extending their life. So the 5 years is because it was a diesel vehicle, and what they're seeing is because the maintenance is so much lower on an electric vehicle, they don't suddenly get hit at year 5 and they can keep that vehicle on the road for 6, 7 or even 8 years.
I think the nervousness around is the predominant cost in a battery electric vehicle is the battery pack. If that goes wrong, you're looking at 20 grand to replace the battery pack.
Well, this segues very nicely to the next conversation.
I think there's a lot of myths and fake news banded about electrics. I was listening to these guys talking about that over lunch and things, electric vehicles bursting into flames. That's not true. I think the figures are that you're 60% more likely, or 60 times more likely to have your petrol or diesel vehicle burst into flames than you are an electric. And that certainly hasn't been any of our experience. And maintenance costs on our electrics compared to our diesel vehicles are about a third less. And really the only thing that we have had to do to our electrics, and our oldest ones, about 4.5 years old now, is tyres. And a service every year.
And Stephen, can I ask, are you outright purchase as well, don't you? How long are you planning to keep those vehicles?
That's a really good question. We don't know. We've got 4.5-year-old Nissan EMV 200s, and our normal replacement cycle is 4 years, but we're going to go to 5, maybe even 6, and just see how it goes. And that when you talk about whole life costs, and you're extending the life of the vehicle by 1 or 2 years, that whole life cost just plummets.
Well, I was going to buy an electric bus a couple of years ago, and I know it's not a small van, but the principle was that I think it's called the Orion, and the manufacturer said, look, we'll give you a warranty for, I think, 10 years, as long as you sign up to changing the battery after 8 years. So that doubled the life of the vehicle, which made it a whole life cost well, affordable compared to just buying a bus. So I think maybe they've got the marketing strategy wrong with regards to, buy a van instead of that van. What they should be saying is buy that van for twice as long as buying that van, as long as we get rid of some of these myths like the batteries, for wear, and and the warranty side, because the warranties are massive now.
But in terms of if a cell or a module goes down, manufacturer will say battery off, and they'll put the new battery onto the vehicle and give you that vehicle back. That battery will then go to a hub potentially and have the covers removed, because you're working live in a live space within a DC battery, up to 800 volts on some of the higher end vehicles. To replace the modules is quite a lengthy process and a cleaner room technology than you would expect to see in a typical depot garage. But there are specialists out there that will replace cells and modules for you and balance and equalise and refit onto the car, but that's something you probably wouldn't be doing in your own workspace.
ODS, Oxford Direct Services, who work for Oxford City Council, I think the oldest Leaf they've got and the oldest EMV 200 they've got on fleet might be 12 years old. It's got about 80 miles of range, but it's only popping around the city centre. It does exactly what they need them to do, but they've sweated that asset to its absolute, maximum capability, and so by consequence, in terms of costs and ownership and all the rest of it,
Is it as easy as taking it to your dealership and saying, could you please do me a state of health report? Do you have to pay for it?
No, it should be part of the service plan.
Yeah, you get that on when you get the vehicle service.
When you get a vehicle service, of course, if you're going to buy a second-hand one, this is the myth, people don't want to buy second-hand, batteries. Well, actually, ask them for the state of health report before you purchase it. And how many times has it been rapid charged, and how many times has it been domestically charged on a slower charger? The higher charging powers, if it's used a lot, such as taxis, you are hammering the battery space, to be fair. So it will degrade quicker if you're using rapids all the time. But if you're trickle charging, it will last a lot longer. As I said, in a Nissan there are 192 cells, and they're all individual chemistries in their own right. They're being manufactured by potentially AESC at Sunderland here, or another manufacturer. James is more on the manufacturing side, but there are manufacturing defects that could happen during that production phase that after conditioning only manifest themselves 6 months to 8 months to 10 months down the road. It only takes one of the cells to go down and it pulls the whole pack down.
Right.
Because they're all connected in series. It's the Christmas tree lights, isn't it? If they're all connected in series, when one bulb blows, it takes the whole battery down. They're not all parallel like the newer Christmas tree lights that pay a bit more for.
My expertise in terms of supporting the company and where we move forward is very much around the battery technology, in terms of what will be of interest to a lot of people here is the health and safety, the handling, strategically in terms of storage, transportation. So we work with a number of different organisations. Some of the organisations here today, I know we're working with South Tyneside in terms of potentially looking at some work going forward in the next, hopefully in the next few months. But we do work directly with customers to support them, not just technically, but also an awareness in terms of knowledge of this whole industry, where we're sitting at the minute, and what's on the horizon of course, we mentioned today the zero emissions mandate, the electric vehicles going forward. So we like to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's happening in this arena.
It's about making those senior management and directors aware of the task that is in front of us. It may be that it isn't a council decision, it may be that it's a manufacturer decision. We may not be able to buy ICE engine vehicles from whatever date, because they'll only start phasing them out, and once they turn the furnaces off to be building engine blocks, you're stuck with what's available then, and it will be, if you need a fleet of vehicles, this is what you can buy. You either find the money or you won't have the vehicles. Again, our workshops is probably, the vehicle workshops is probably like quite a few of the local authorities in the northeast, where they are quite older establishments where they're set up for internal combustion engine vehicles. The staff that work in those workshops are predominantly trained on internal combustion engine vehicles, so the transition for the workshops and the staff that work in that to take a bigger influx of electric vehicles as well. So it's mine and Paul's role to try and make the directors and whoever aware of, like, this is not just a case of installing a couple of chargers into the depots and thinking, right, we're done, we're ready to go.